So in 2022, Matt Reeves' The Batman had released, and it earned both critical and audience acclaim, as it was honestly one of the best superhero movies to release to date. And one of the main things that people took away from that film is that people started to reevaluate Robert Pattinson's acting career. Now, for most mainstream audiences, this was probably one of his first times resurfacing since the Twilight series, but he'd actually kept working after that. Just it felt more like he was rediscovering himself in more niche, smaller projects where he honestly excelled and was proving to the world the kind of caliber of actor he is. And realistically, outside of The Lighthouse, which was a brilliant film and definitely a much more marketed movie, it still fell in that niche zone of genre films. And that's fantastic for him. He deserves the recognition. However, one of the other things that also received a lot of praise in Matt Reeves' The Batman is the introduction of the Penguin played by Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell is a capital A actor.
Now, if I've done something to you, just tell me what I've done to you. And if I've said something to you, maybe I said something when I was drunk and I've forgotten it, but I don't think I said something when I was drunk and I've forgotten it. But if I did, then tell me what it was. And I'll say sorry for that too, Colin.
I just don't like you no more.
You liked me yesterday.
He understands how to shape himself into the role he's playing, and he understands the nuances that need to be portrayed for the audience to gravitate towards the characters he plays. I feel like Colin Farrell is an actor most people can recognize because he isn't gatekept by specific genres, and he loves to let his acting ability really flex to let him take on a spectrum of different roles. But I think taking on the role of the Penguin certainly is one of his most ambitious roles he's yet to play, because in the pantheon of villains in the Batman world, it always feels like the Penguin is written to be the goofy, fly on the wall you just can't swat to death, since he's always appearing, but never in an actual intimidating way, you know? He always feels like the punchline to jokes and is like a secondary threat. I think one of the best things the Batman did was starting this character as a secondary threat, but leaving the groundwork for him to become a bigger threat later on. Much like Batman himself in the movie, Oz feels like he's not really in his stride yet, and it feels like he's still not at the peak of his powers as well. And so once the Penguin TV show released, you quickly learn that, oh yeah, he's not the butt of every joke anymore, and he's actually a dastardly human being. So the premise of the show is basically Oz Cobb's journey and uphill battle for the power and control of Gotham after the events of the movie. He impulsively kills the heir to the Falcone dynasty, which just adds to the trigger of everybody's claim for the right of being the mob king in Gotham. In a way, this feels like a micro or localized version of the hunger for power of Westeros, with all these different forces and mobsters manipulating and trying to destroy each other. The show masterfully takes the aesthetic and ambiance that was set in The Batman and really fleshes it out in an extraordinary way, where you feel like you 100% believe that this is Gotham with real streets and real people. And y'all, this show already has a special place in my heart because of episode 7. When we're in the flashback of Oz's childhood, it was filmed on the street where I literally grew up. Like, that's Yonkers, New York. And I even fact-checked it, and it in fact was shot there. I couldn't believe that that was the case, that my childhood neighborhood was used to portray the slums of Gotham. Gotham as a whole is meant to be a rock-bottom city based off of New York, but Crown Point is supposed to be the worst of Gotham. So I don't know, that was just too funny to me. It's kind of insane how this show manages to, at the surface level, be a mob drama, albeit an epic one, but it's the variety in storytelling that never feels disconnected or like it doesn't fit into the overall narrative. It's just unbelievable. You have the primary issue where Oz is trying to use his wits and talk his way to the top of the food chain, but you also have a very powerful story in Sophia Falcone's revenge for her brother's death, and a very interesting and disturbing family drama about her past and the power of betrayal not being limited to blood. You have the physical representation of light and good in Victor, as he's the sweet, likable guy that while he does terrible things, it's just the unfortunate reality of survival in this world. There's plenty of moments throughout the series that you find yourself rooting for him to do something bad or evil, despite that there's a sadness in the fact that he keeps going deeper and deeper into the dark side. But you can't help but smile or cheer him on whenever he smiles or does something sincere and hopeful. And it's funny because lately we've been getting a lot of villain representation on the big screen, but for some arbitrary reason, they've tried to make them into these sympathetic and borderline heroic characters. It comes off as these characters are misunderstood people, or they're not bad people, they just look mean. I can't stand it. It really sucks. So it's kind of amazing that we're kind of rooting for bad guys against other bad guys in the Penguin. We're quite literally rooting for villains here, and even though it's made very clear that these are villains, it doesn't mean that they don't have other colors outside of that. And even as a surrogate character, Victor is a thief that sells parts for money, but we like him because he's the charming, sincere, sweet, shy guy that as soon as we're introduced to him, we know things aren't gonna end well for him. And in the wise words of Harvey Dent,
you either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
in his perspective, he was just trying to look out for his neighborhood. If it was based off of his intentions, he probably would have died in an attempt to fix his neighborhood. But circumstances and ill-advised decisions led to his demise, and had he not gotten so close to Oz, he probably would have ended up as a mob boss later down the line. And I mean, obviously his fundamental naive and good nature was 100% gonna get taken advantage of, and well, he flew too close to the sun. Devastating. No music, no build-up, just cold, done in a matter-of-fact way with zero emotion. That is a frightening way of cementing the idea that the Penguin is diabolical. But the real meat and potatoes of this story is definitely the dynamic between Sophia and Oz. Do we feel sympathy for Sophia when she just wants to avenge literally the only person in her family that doesn't make her feel less or would betray her easily? Of course we do. This creates an awesome tug of war between her and Oz because the shift in advantage constantly sways, and it makes for good engagement, since it's never one-sided. I'd say Sophia Falcone, played by Cristin Milioti, is probably my favorite character in the show. For a character that is never mentioned in the film, yet is significantly relevant in this world of the Batman, she was spectacular. Like I said before, with the reason that she was brought into this story, she's already extremely sympathetic, regardless of how useless he felt. She's also dealing with the generational issues with the clash of old age versus new age management of these powerful families that puts her in some unfortunate situations. I love the idea that on top of the fact that she's at war with the Maronis and with Oz, she's not even safe in her own home. She delivers such a powerful sense of paranoia, and even when she tries to trust again, people still sometimes betray her. The family drama within the Falcone family is really fascinating, and because of that, it led to some of the best scenes of the entire show. Her time in jail in the middle chunk of this show was so good, and it explained so much about how people in this world were so easily swayed, and loyalty really ran thin. I mean, hell, the nickname Hangman was the perfect example of how despite her attempts of helping other women with the foundation she had, nobody even attempted to back her up when she was accused of killing those women, one of which being her own mother. I just really love her character, but on top of everything, she's terrifying. Like, she has this thing where she makes her eyes go huge, and added with the look on her face, it's just really dark and intense. And I mean, if you're willing to blow up a whole city block, which definitely killed a couple of Ninja Turtles, then that tells you how scary they are. And of course, you have the Penguin. I 100% would back up any nominations that Colin Farrell would have for playing the Penguin. You have this guy that's so smart with his mouth, yet everybody knows he loves to run his mouth, yet everybody also falls for it as well. I really like that he uses his wits and his head to their full extent against people that are very much more powerful than him. It's the tried and true underdog story, but with the twist being that he's a bad dude. I mean, after all, we're talking about the guy that despite his obsession with his mother's approval and attention, under the most intense amount of pressure and her life literally being on the line, he wouldn't budge about accepting the blame that was clearly his to take. It just shows you he really didn't care about her. Bonus points for Colin Farrell, by the way, because despite this, the hospital scene towards the end was definitely heavy and hard to watch. There was so much emotion in it. It was just beautifully done. The idea that he's the most heinous man, but he earns sympathy points because he cares for his mother is brilliant because it makes the last moments with her that much harder to watch. It was his fault, and no matter how much he promised her, it was all in vain, and because that's not even what she truly desired. She just wanted closure. It wasn't enough that her last words to him were that he's the devil. This is a character that is completely irredeemable. He had the most loyal crew at one point that really saved his ass multiple times, and when it came down to it, he really didn't care and abandoned them. The bomb explosion in his lab was one of the best sequences in the show, not only because it showed that Sophia can outsmart Oz, but it also showed that he cares for nobody else besides himself, that bastard. And the icing on the cake is his relationship with Victor. It's scary to think that you feel at one point comfortable with Vic being right next to Oz. It's almost like you have a sense of safety, despite all the monstrous acts that you've seen Oz do throughout the entirety of the show. So when the true climax of the show happens, you're left broken and, just like Vic, speechless. And it punctuates the ending to the show in one of the most satisfying ways, with Oz having his iconic animated series suit, and with the bat signal closing out to show that things have gotten bad enough to where Gotham needs its true hero. And me personally, I don't agree with the critique that why isn't Batman here, or why hasn't he stopped Oz? I just think that it's dumb because realistically, Batman is brand new in the movie. Like, literally, he's starting off his career just 2 years in, so nobody really trusts him. So of course the police or people in general aren't going to really want to have the most faith in him. And I think it makes more sense the way the show actually handled it, because it's literally that desperate that they actually have to call on him. One of my favorite aspects to the show is that in a cast full of powerful, dangerous, yet likable characters, it could have easily made the hierarchy of the underworld feel untouchable or invincible. However, I like how it balances and juggles all the characters to have their moments of power but never feel unbeatable. Characters are constantly threatened and are a hop, skip, and a jump away from being murdered. I love how everybody feels vulnerable to death, and it makes it a fair playing field. I also really appreciate that while this is definitively in Matt Reeves' Batman universe, you don't have to have seen the movie to get the story. The flashback sequence connects to it, of course, but it 100% stands as its own isolated story as well. The show is deliciously dark, and a bold statement written in freaking neon lights in the sky for all other projects that want to write a humanized villain. This, in my opinion, is the definitive rubric and hallmark on how to do it. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.